Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. At the age of only 50, Robert Taylor Smith, better known as Rob Rodriguez, passed away, leaving behind a wife and 3 daughters. The family gathered in the lawyer's office to hear the contents of Rob's will. The 4 women sat around a large table while the lawyer's assistant quietly placed cups of coffee in front of them and took a seat next to a box of tissues, anticipating they might soon be needed. Lawyer Daniel Garcia opened a folder, pulling out several sheets of paper to begin reading Rob's personal message. "This is the real Rob Rodriguez," Garcia said, holding up the handwritten pages for all to see. Rob wanted his final words to be written by himself. The official will has already been submitted to the court, but he asked me to read these handwritten notes to you first. There are messages here that are not included in the official version. The lawyer cleared his throat, took a sip of water, and began to read. "If you are hearing this, it means I am no longer with you. My friend and lawyer, Daniel Garcia, helped ensure that my family would be taken care of. But before getting to those details, let me tell you a story that my daughters might not know. When I first fell in love with your mother, Margaret." Rob's voice seemed to resonate from the pages, and Margaret couldn't help but smile. "I was not yet 25 years old. My parents thought I was too young and advised me to wait, but Margaret and I were inseparable. I was already receiving funds from the family trust and was confident I could support us. We saw no reason to delay our happiness. Eventually, after some resistance, my parents agreed to our wedding when we told them Margaret was pregnant with our first daughter, Poppy. But my mother insisted on a prenuptial agreement to protect the family assets. The agreement stated that Margaret would have no claims to the trust funds designated for me and our future children. Margaret, ever trusting, signed the papers without studying them too carefully. She believed in me, and that's how she always was. But everything worked out. We had a good marriage. I was happy for the past 25 years. Our family grew quickly. After Poppy came Mia, and then Victoria completed our trio. I adored my daughters. They filled my life with joy. But Margaret thought 3 children were more than enough. She would joke that I spent too much time with the girls. Yes, your mother was jealous of you 3. Rob's humor even touched his final words, prompting a few smiles around the table. Although I wanted a son, Margaret and I agreed that our family was complete. I even offered to have a vasectomy, but Margaret wouldn't allow it. She was convinced it would lead to impotence and didn't want to take the risk, he added ironically, despite the farewell message. So we stopped at 3. At 49, I was diagnosed with acute leukemia. The doctors said it was rare for my age and the prognosis was grim. With my parents gone and no siblings, I had no close relatives for a bone marrow transplant. My rare blood type, AB, and unique white blood cell composition made finding a donor difficult. My wonderful daughters, despite the slim chances, volunteered to be tested. Unfortunately, none of them were a match. Margaret tried to prepare them for disappointment, advising them not to even start the tests, but they insisted, wanting to help in any way possible. As expected, the results confirmed that none of them could be donors. I reached out to specialists worldwide in search of a miracle, but we never found one. At this point, the lawyer paused, allowing the weight of the story to settle in the room. He took another sip of water before continuing. But instead of a miracle, we found something else. One of the doctors I grew close to during treatment noticed something odd in the DNA results. Not only were my daughters not matches as donors, but they weren't full sisters to each other either. They shared the same mother, but each had a different father. The room fell silent. Garcia set the paper aside for a moment, letting the words sink in. The daughters, stunned, exchanged glances before turning to their mother all at once. "Mom?" all 3 asked at once, their voices filled with disbelief. "You cheated on Dad?" Poppy asked, her voice trembling with shock. "No, of course not," Margaret exclaimed, her face pale. "There must be some mistake in the test results." Garcia continued reading the document, maintaining his usual calm demeanor. Everything happened right on schedule, just as expected. Despite my assurances that a mistake had been made, The doctor recommended the only way to confirm the results, a DNA test for Margaret. If there had been an error in the lab, the test would have shown that she wasn't the biological mother of our children. I quietly took her hairbrush, and the subsequent DNA results confirmed what I didn't want to believe. Margaret was, without a doubt, the mother of our daughters. He paused, waiting for a collective gasp, then smiled as tissues began to be passed around the room. Over the next week, I secluded myself in the hospital, claiming I needed to undergo tests related to my immune system, which kept me isolated. It was unbearable to come to terms with the fact that my beloved wife had never truly belonged to me, even before we exchanged vows. I had to face the bitter truth that I had been deceived throughout our entire marriage. Her fear of my vasectomy suddenly made sense. It had nothing to do with preventing an accidental pregnancy. The truth was that my operation couldn't possibly affect her ability to get pregnant again. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. It didn't take long for him to find out that while I was confined to my hospital bed, Margaret had been seeing several men. The scale of her infidelity was far greater than I could have imagined. However, despite all this, I had to confront the undeniable fact. My daughters, in every important sense, were still my daughters. They loved me, and I loved them more than anything in the world. They had no idea about the true circumstances of their birth. If they knew, they would never have agreed to the DNA test. I loved them, and they loved me. That will never change. I will remain their father and protector, no matter what. Their education funds were already secured, so I knew they would be financially safe. As I reached for the phone to call my friend Daniel Garcia to start the divorce process, the absurdity of my situation hit me like a brick. I was terminally ill. The likelihood of me surviving long enough to finalize the divorce was minimal. Even if I survived, all I would achieve would be funding my wife's future affairs. Divorce wasn't the solution. I needed Margaret to face the consequences, not benefit from our failed marriage. The private investigator continued to dig into her past, speaking with her acquaintances and examining her financial records, especially her credit reports. That's when he found the gold mine. She regularly visited a small, unremarkable restaurant located about 15 miles from here. The only notable feature of the establishment was the adjacent motel. The staff, including the motel manager, were well aware of Margaret's frequent visits and her numerous companions. The motel manager even suggested that Margaret might have been working as an escort. The detective obtained surveillance footage from the motel and identified the license plates of her lover's cars. Some of these men had no shame in bragging about their exploits over drinks, and it was in one of those conversations that I learned the most painful detail. Margaret only used the motel when she knew I might return home. At other times, her lovers comfortably settled into our home, sometimes even in the guest rooms, while my daughters were upstairs, unaware of what was happening below. One of her lovers, Callum Wilson, smirked as he recounted the story of how I came home unexpectedly one day. In a panic, almost comically, he climbed out the window while my wife threw his clothes onto the lawn. He fled, and Margaret hastily erased all traces of his presence while my daughters distracted me downstairs. My daughters, unwitting accomplices in their mother's betrayal, helped her hide the truth. Victoria cried out, "Dad knew!" Through tears, she confessed, "He knew we were protecting Mom." Tears flowed freely as tissues were passed around again. Garcia continued reading, his voice steady. This was the unvarnished truth of my 25-year marriage. There's nothing more to say, except to explain my reaction and, most importantly, to state that I hold no ill will towards my daughters. I genuinely believe that they kept their mother's secrets out of love for her, trying to preserve our family. That is why, with the help of Garcia and my financial advisors, I have created a trust fund for them. It is large enough to maintain their lifestyle and secure their future, even for their own children. They are also the sole beneficiaries of the family trust, which I now manage as the sole trustee. Regardless of what happens between Margaret and me, my daughters will be provided for, now and always. The established trust contains a set of strict conditions, similar to those outlined in the family trust. If any beneficiary, including my daughters and their descendants, fails to comply with these conditions, they will be irrevocably excluded from both trusts. The first and most important rule is that any form of communication with Margaret, my widow, will be considered a violation. This applies to direct contact, communication through third parties, or any form of correspondence, written, verbal, or digital. The prohibition extends to gestures of goodwill, financial assistance, or support, even if conveyed through intermediaries. Furthermore, if the widow attempts to contact any of the beneficiaries, this will also be considered a violation. Therefore, all beneficiaries are advised to completely avoid her. The third condition states that if any assets, property, or funds are transferred to the widow by a beneficiary, that individual and their descendants will be permanently excluded from the trust. Additionally, a sum of $300,000 will be paid to anyone who reports a violation that leads to a beneficiary's disqualification. As a final test of loyalty, even Margaret herself can claim this reward if she reports a violation by her children or initiates contact with them. What will prevail, I wonder, maternal devotion to her children or her desire to claim $300,000? If all current beneficiaries are disqualified, the assets will be transferred to tertiary beneficiaries, charitable organizations specified in the trust documents. The term Margaret in these documents refers not only to my widow, but also applies to all former beneficiaries excluded from the trust. Thus, any communication with a disqualified former beneficiary will also be considered a violation of the trust. The family trust attorney, Daniel Garcia, has been appointed to manage the newly created trust, which is now officially called the Robert Rodriguez Revenge Trust. All inquiries regarding this new structure should be directed to him. Garcia took a sip of water, surveying the room full of women sitting in shock, like deer caught in headlights. Rob Rodriguez also wanted to remind everyone that each of you can claim a reward, and naturally, the fewer the beneficiaries, the larger the share of the trust's funds. With a smirk, Garcia continued reading the document. To create this revenge trust, nearly all my assets were transferred into it with the enthusiastic approval of my loving wife. At this moment, Margaret screamed in fury, vehemently denying the accusation. "I never agreed to this! It's all a lie!" she shouted. Completely unfazed, Garcia picked up a remote and pressed a button. A large screen in the room lit up, showing a video of Margaret sitting with the firm's notary, a stack of documents in front of her. The notary explained that each document required her signature next to Robert Rodriguez's. She asked Margaret if she had reviewed the documents, to which Margaret impatiently replied that she had, and immediately began signing each one. The notary asked again if she was sure she had read everything, to which Margaret snapped, "Of course I have. Do you think I'm an idiot?" The video showed the notary rolling her eyes, lifting each signed document to the camera. When the notary asked again, "There's a lot of legal paperwork here. Are you sure you don't want to consult your attorney?" Margaret rolled her eyes once more and sharply replied, "I'm perfectly capable of understanding what I'm signing." Once the last document was signed, the video ended. Garcia turned off the screen and calmly stated, "The documents you signed and confirmed your understanding of were the very ones that officially transferred nearly all of Robert Rodriguez's assets, including his real estate, into the Revenge Trust." Returning to Robert's statement, Garcia continued reading while Margaret began gasping for breath. "Despite all this, I have decided to be generous toward my widow. From the assets remaining outside the trust, she will receive an inheritance of $25,000. That is $1,000 for each year of our marriage, which, given the circumstances, is far more than those years were worth." Margaret felt her chest tighten. $25,000? She blurted, her voice trembling with disbelief. "We were worth millions, even without the trust. How am I supposed to survive on $25,000 a year?" Garcia, the lawyer, remained calm, leaning back in his chair. "Rob Rodriguez was surprised when you decided to put everything into the trust for your daughters," he noted in an even tone. "But that's exactly what you did." Margaret's eyes narrowed, and she clenched her fists. Garcia casually picked up the remote. "Would you like to watch the video again?" he asked with a slight smirk. "Perhaps you still don't fully understand. It's not $25,000 a year. That $25,000, that's your entire inheritance." It felt like the walls were closing in on Margaret as she stood, her fiery gaze locked on Garcia. "This can't be true. If you think I'm just going to sit back and let this happen, you're gravely mistaken. I will find a way to get that money, even if he put it in a trust." Garcia's smile widened. "You won't. You're not part of the trust, and the prenuptial agreement ensures you won't see a cent. It's airtight." Margaret's lips curled into a sneer. "That prenup only applies to the Smith Trust," she declared confidently. Garcia remained unfazed. "Incorrect," he replied calmly. "You should review the document. The Smith Trust isn't even mentioned. It covers all of Rob Rodriguez's assets placed in any trust." Margaret's face twisted in shock. "In any trust?" she echoed. "That's right. Even the Revenge Trust," Garcia said, his smile never fading. "You were present when it was established. Want me to show you the video again?" Margaret let out a bitter laugh and reached for her bag. "We'll see how this looks in court." She turned sharply, throwing over her shoulder. "Girls, we're leaving." Her daughters hesitated, nervously exchanging glances, looking between their mother and the lawyer. Garcia leaned back in his chair, his smile broadening even more. "You can go with her if you want," he said coldly. "But know this, the trust's conditions don't take effect until tomorrow. Your father left a final message. Despite everything, he loved you and forgave you. But your mother, he wanted her to be left penniless and alone, and the only way to ensure that is through you." The girls turned pale as Garcia continued. "Your father raised you as his own and trusted you to carry out his final wishes." Later, Garcia stood by the window of his office, watching the girls gather around their mother in the parking lot. Their heated argument was faintly audible in the distance. He couldn't help but recall his last conversation with Rob Rodriguez. Even in his final days, weakened by illness, Rob had smiled with a strange sense of satisfaction. "I almost regret that I won't be around to see the fallout," he mused. "I bet at least 2 of them will be disqualified within a year, and 1 will get everything." Garcia remembered how Rob's face lit up with a grim sense of humor. Will 2 of them lose it all? Or will 1 manage to take it all? Who knows? But it'll be fun to watch it unfold. Rob had erupted in a fit of coughing, laughing between ragged breaths. "Do you think we stand a chance of disinheriting all 3? Garcia had shrugged. "I can add a clause excluding them for infidelity or marriage. If they take after their mother, they don't stand a chance." Rob had smirked, mimicking a Star Trek captain. "Make it so." And so, it was done. Before his death, Rob had given Garcia one final instruction. Make sure the private investigators and charities know about the $300,000 reward for exposing any actions that could disqualify them. They'll be watching my daughters. 2 weeks later, after signing the revised trusts, Rob Rodriguez passed away. A faint smile still lingered on his face. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I was hunting wild boars and resting in my sleeping bag when the silence was pierced by a woman's scream. Instinctively, I grabbed my rifle and went to investigate. From the edge of the forest, I saw the events unfold in the clearing. I quickly dealt with the bad guys. Even the one who tried to surrender didn't deserve mercy. I wasn't planning to involve the police. My hunt was over, and I planned to be home by morning. But curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out of the shadows, still holding the rifle, and approached the trio. As I got closer, I pointed to the young woman whose clothes were torn and asked if she was all right. The man answered, surprisingly, in clear English. "Thanks to you, senor, she is now safe," he said. He then explained that he had paid the 2 men, the ones with the knife and the gun, to help him and his family cross into the U.S., planning to meet up with his cousin. After crossing the border, They were supposed to meet a driver who would take them further, but something went wrong in the clearing. One of the smugglers decided he wanted extra compensation and tried to assault the young woman, Juanita. I asked where their transport was, and the man, whose name was Roberto, said the car was parked on the road. I asked if he could drive, and he nodded. Searching the bodies, I found $2,000 on the man with the knife and another $3,000 split between the others. I handed all the money to Roberto and told him to get in the car with his family and follow me. I decided to drive them myself. It was only a 4-hour trip, and after dropping them off, I said goodbye and headed home. Arriving home 2 days earlier than planned, I saw the driveway filled with cars. At first, I thought my wife, Elizabeth, had invited her friends over for a card night. I was only half right. The party was indeed happening, but no one was playing cards. As I walked in, I saw Elizabeth's best friend, Steph, tangled up on the couch with a man I didn't recognize. Another colleague of hers, Bess, was sprawled in an armchair with another man whose name escaped me. As I realized what was going on, I had a sinking feeling about what awaited me upstairs. Passing the guest room, I peeked inside and saw Elizabeth's brother, Tom, tangled with yet another one of her colleagues. When I reached our bedroom, I heard a man's voice shouting, "Almost done! Who's next?" When I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to find Elizabeth in bed with her boss. By the way, I took out my phone and recorded the whole thing on video. As soon as my presence became clear, chaos erupted. Steph noticed me first, exclaiming, "Oh, crap!" as she clumsily tried to untangle herself from her partner. The guy with Bess backed away, raising his hands as if to say, "Hey man, I'm just here for fun." Passing the guest room again, I saw the shock in Tom's eyes, as if he thought, "You weren't supposed to be here." But the image of Elizabeth's face, twisted in horror, will stay with me for many years. Rick, her boss, tried to show his bravado, jumping up from the bed and striking a ridiculous karate pose. I couldn't hold back my laughter. It was just too absurd. I knew exactly how these situations usually ended. If I hit him first, I'd likely be the one handcuffed, as he was technically Elizabeth's guest. But if I provoked him into hitting me first, I'd have the legal right to defend myself and come out clean. That's why I kept laughing, not only to mock him, but also to push him over the edge. I exaggerated my amusement and added, "You look like a complete idiot in that fake martial arts pose, especially with everything swinging around." It worked. He lunged at me. Oh, right. I forgot to mention that since the moment I walked into the room, I had been recording everything on video. He probably thought that because I had a phone in my hand, I was vulnerable. Maybe he believed that if he landed the first punch, he could take me down. As he rushed at me, I threw the phone at his face. His reflexes kicked in, and he raised his hands to protect himself. That's when I hit him directly between the legs. He collapsed to the floor, clutching himself in pain. Calmly, I picked up my phone, grabbed Rick's arm, twisted it behind his back, and walked him to the front door. When we reached the porch, I shoved him outside, still naked, and for added effect, I turned on the porch light before closing the door. While I dealt with Rick, most of the guests had already dressed and quietly left the house. Only 3 people remained. Tom, who said he stayed to make sure I wouldn't harm his sister. Steph, who offered emotional support in case it was needed. And of course, Elizabeth. Steph asked what I planned to do next, and I told her I was going to divorce Elizabeth. She looked surprised and asked why. "It was just a fling," she said. But for me, it wasn't that simple. "There's no love there," she tried to explain, as if that would fix things. I shook my head. Elizabeth and I had made the same vows to each other. Sure, I had been attracted to other women, but I never acted on those impulses. From the moment I met Elizabeth, I chose her and remained faithful. She had promised the same, but broke that vow. From what I could tell, this wasn't a one-time mistake. Their affair had been going on for a while. I went back to the bedroom where Elizabeth sat at the edge of the bed, crying. I told her to stop crying and start packing. Through her tears, she insisted, "I don't have to leave. This is my house, too." I looked at her and calmly replied, "No, not anymore." I reminded her of the prenuptial agreement her father had insisted I sign before the wedding. Elizabeth's family had money, and her father was adamant about protecting their assets. Back then, I didn't care about their business or wealth. I just wanted to be with Elizabeth. So I signed the document without even reading it and tucked it away, not thinking about it again. Until my brother went through a brutal divorce after catching his wife cheating. She took everything she could, and he was left with almost nothing. One night, over drinks at Bud's bar, he mentioned how much he regretted not having a prenuptial agreement. That got me thinking, and I pulled out mine and read it carefully. To my surprise, there was a clause about infidelity. If either spouse cheated, they would leave the marriage with only the clothes on their back and whatever was in their name. Since everything Elizabeth and I owned was in both our names, she was left with nothing. She packed her things and left that very night, likely dragging her naked boss with her. The next morning, the first thing I did was go to the bank, close all our joint accounts, and open new ones in my name. Then I hired a lawyer and started the divorce process. At the meeting with my lawyer, I learned that we lived in a no-fault divorce state. But when I mentioned that Elizabeth's boss was also the owner of her company, my lawyer asked if the company had any policies regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. I said I believed it did, and that I had a copy of the employee handbook somewhere at home. That night I checked my home office, and sure enough, the handbook was sitting on a shelf. The next day I brought it to my lawyer. After reviewing it, he smiled and said, "Now we've got him." The divorce papers were served to both Elizabeth and her boss right at the office, in front of all their colleagues. 2 days later, their legal team responded. When I came home from work, I was surprised to see Elizabeth's father sitting on the porch, waiting for me. After a brief exchange of greetings, he asked if we could talk inside. Once we were settled, he didn't waste time and got straight to the point. "What's this I hear about you divorcing Elizabeth and kicking her out of the house? It's her house too," he began. I didn't flinch. "I found out she was cheating, so I told her to leave," I replied calmly. His expression darkened. "This is all because of that agreement I signed before the wedding, isn't it? The one that says if either of you cheats, the guilty party leaves with nothing. Do you even remember that?" I nodded. "Of course I remember." "She's only human," he insisted. "She made a mistake, but she loves you. I'm sure you can work through this." I shook my head firmly. If it had been just one mistake, maybe I would have forgiven her. But this affair? It's been going on for over a year, and it's not just with one man. It's much more complicated than that. He sighed heavily. That agreement was only meant to protect the family business. I looked him straight in the eye, completely unfazed. "Then you should have written it differently. The terms are clear. Whoever cheats leaves with nothing. You and Anne insisted on that, Bob." His voice grew stern, almost threatening. "You'd better back off, son. If you push this, I'll have no choice but to hire her a lawyer. This could get ugly fast." Without breaking eye contact, I calmly pulled out my phone, tapped a few buttons, and showed him the screen. "You want trouble? Here it is." His face paled as he looked at the video. "That's Tom," he muttered. "Yes," I confirmed. At that moment, the sound of the video echoed through the room. "I'm almost done. Who's next?" In the recording, his daughter and her lover hurriedly scrambled out of bed. I paused the video. "And now tell me, how would you feel if all your friends and family received this as a personal gift?" He stared at me in horror. "You wouldn't dare." My gaze remained cold. "Oh, I would. If you don't interfere, the video stays buried. Once the divorce is finalized, no one but you, me, and my lawyer will ever see it. But if you go against me or hire her a lawyer, I'll make sure everyone sees it." I expected him to explode in anger, but what happened next caught me off guard. He pulled a revolver from his pocket and aimed it at me. "Give me the phone. Delete the video. Now." I raised my hands in surrender. "All right, fine. Then it's war." I handed him the phone. He gestured for me to move to the other side of the room. I obeyed, watching as he deleted the video. After that, he set the phone down, stood up, and without another word, threw over his shoulder, "See you in court," and walked out. As soon as he left, I immediately sent the video, which was saved in the cloud, to my mother-in-law. About half an hour later, my phone rang. It was him. "You bastard. How could you send that filth to my wife?" I remained calm. I warned you, Bob. Go against me and I'll go to extremes. Did you really think I wouldn't have backups? There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a low growl. So far, I've only sent it to your wife. But if you push again, the whole world will see it. He shouted a string of curses before hanging up. In the end, he didn't hire a lawyer, and the divorce went smoothly. A few days after the process was finalized, I was surprised by a call from Steph. "Are you serious about having feelings for me?" she asked. Without hesitation, I answered, "Yes, I am." "I'm free tonight," she said. Since I'd filed for divorce, I hadn't been with anyone. I didn't want to become like Elizabeth, the one who cheats. But now that the divorce was behind me, I was ready for something new. "What do you suggest?" I asked. "Dinner, some drinks, and good conversation. After that, we'll see where things go." "Sounds perfect," I replied. "I'll pick you up at 7. That evening, after we enjoyed dinner and had a few drinks, I decided to bring up the topic of her phone call. It seemed like a simple question. "I figured out what kind of person you are," she replied. "I thought you wouldn't start dating anyone until your marriage was officially over." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Am I wrong?" she asked. I sighed. "No, you're right. That's exactly who I am. But how did you know I was divorced?" "I saw the video of her infidelity online. She was fired from her job. She's in a terrible situation." Then she added, "You know she still has feelings for you, right? Just not strong enough to stay loyal." I sat there, considering her words. "It wasn't entirely her fault," she continued. "The first time she was drugged, that creep filmed it and told her she belonged to him now. He threatened to release the footage if she resisted." I shook my head, disappointed. "That doesn't excuse her actions. If she had come to me after that, maybe we could have dealt with it together. But she didn't trust me enough to believe I would help her." "Why are we even talking about her right now?" she interrupted, changing the subject. "We're supposed to be having fun, so what's next?" I smiled at her. "You know I'm interested. The next move is yours." "Your place or mine?" she teased. "Mine is closer," I said, glancing around. "Then what are we still doing here?" The night continued, full of unexpected moments of intimacy. When we finally got to bed, I thought I was done for the night. But then she turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Do you think you have one more round in you?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure. "I'm not sure. I usually call it a night once I'm in bed." She smiled. "Want to bet I can change that?" I shrugged. "Give it a try." It took a bit of effort, but she succeeded. Afterward, I told her I'd have to rely on her guidance since I didn't have much experience with this kind of thing. She looked at me with surprise and interest. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Because she enjoyed being with you this way, but she never did this with you. It's another thing I can use against her." Steph continued to explain how everything worked, and to my surprise, I actually enjoyed it. When we finished, she went to the bathroom and returned with a warm cloth and towel. She gently wiped me down and playfully said, "I want everything to be fresh and clean when we wake up together." That was the first sign she planned to stay the night. Out of curiosity, I asked, "What are your plans for tomorrow?" She laughed and replied, "I'm spending the day with you, of course. Is that okay?" I had a few things to take care of, but nothing urgent, so I nodded. "That works for me." As we lay there, drifting off to sleep, I wondered where all of this was leading. The answer came the next morning over a leisurely breakfast. We woke up still tangled in each other. Her hand found me again, and soon we started up once more. After 3 rounds, we finally moved on to breakfast. As we sat at the table, eating pancakes and bacon, she looked at me seriously. "Just so you know, I'm not looking for anything serious. I know myself. I can't stay faithful." Her honesty didn't catch me off guard. I had no expectations, so I nodded. "That's fine with me." We spent the rest of the weekend testing our limits, exhausting ourselves completely. By the time Sunday came around and she left, I was drained in every sense. Even then, she tried one more time, but I could barely keep my eyes open. After 2 months of casual encounters, my lawyer called. All the lawsuits had been settled, and after all the expenses, I had $2 million left. About a month later, Steph said it was time for us to part ways, though she hoped we could remain friends. I agreed without any hard feelings. Over the next 5 months, I dated a few women, had fun, but didn't find anyone I wanted to commit to. I was content, but nothing lasted long. One evening, I went to a restaurant for dinner. As I looked over the menu, the waitress came over to take my order. "I'll have whiskey and seafood pasta," I said. "Of course, senor," she replied with a wink, adding, "Maybe you can make sure I get home safely after work." I blinked, not believing my ears. "Sorry, what?" "That evening, wasn't it you who decided to step in and become my protector? Was it really you?" "Yes, it was me." "At that moment, I didn't recognize you. You were wrapped in clothing and your head was hidden under a scarf. I was trying to settle in, but there wasn't enough work. Too many people were looking for jobs and there were very few openings. My cousin had told me that there were more opportunities here." She glanced at the clock and said, "I need to go and place your order." "Maybe we can continue this conversation later," she added, walking away. As she disappeared into the distance, I couldn't help but notice that her figure was just as captivating as her face. I thought that talking to her later might not be such a bad idea. That evening, I walked her home, and 3 years have passed since then. She has given me 2 sons, and I am happy. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.